The screen still read connected long after Ethan said goodbye. He claimed he was in a meeting, but I heard the crisp rustle of silk and a woman laughing. I froze as his voice dropped low, telling her to keep me quiet until the money was signed. He insisted the baby had to carry a different last name. I did not scream. I just opened my notes app and started typing every word of my own destruction. My name is Mara Ellison, and I make a living finding the cracks in perfect structures. At 34 years old, I am the lead ethics and internal controls specialist for Redwood Meridian Group in Denver. My job is not to trust people. My job is to verify what they claim to be true against the cold, hard reality of their digital footprints. I spend my days looking for the outlier in the data, the expense report that does not quite add up, or the timestamp that puts an executive in a hotel room when he claimed to be at a conference. I never expected that my most significant audit would begin on a Tuesday afternoon with a phone call to my own husband. I called Ethan to ask about dinner. It was a mundane impulse. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth and practiced. "I'm jammed up here, Mara," he said, the regret in his tone sounding polished enough to sell. "This merger meeting is going long. I might be another 2 hours. Don't wait up." "Okay," I said, staring at the spreadsheet on my dual monitors. "Love you." "Love you too," he replied. I pulled the phone away from my ear to tap the red button, but a notification from my work email distracted me for a split second. My thumb hovered, but it never made contact. I placed the phone face up on my desk, assuming he had hung up. The timer on the screen kept ticking. It moved from 45 seconds to 48. The line should have gone dead. Instead, the static shifted. It was not silence. It was the distinct, sharp click of a plastic water bottle cap being twisted off. Then came the sound of fabric moving against fabric, the unmistakable, heavy rustle of silk sliding over skin. It was an intimate sound. Then a woman laughed. It was not a stranger's laugh. It was a soft, throaty sound that prickled the hair on the back of my neck because I knew the cadence of it. I leaned over the phone. My breath held in my lungs like smoke. "Don't worry." Ethan's voice came through the speaker, but the professional warmth he had used on me was gone. His tone was now low and authoritative. "She'll apologize. Like always. Mara hates conflict. She folds the second she thinks she is being difficult." My hand gripped the edge of my mahogany desk. He spoke of me not as a wife, but as an obstacle to be managed. "I don't care if she folds," the woman said. Her voice was muffled. Perhaps she was moving across the room, but the familiarity of it made my stomach turn over. "Just keep her quiet until after the ceremony. Once the money is signed, we are clear. Signed. Then transfer to Harbor Line. Delete the clinic appointment," Ethan instructed. There was no hesitation in his voice. He sounded like he was running a project, ticking off action items on a checklist. I reached for a pen. I did not scream. I did not grab the phone and yell into the void. The auditor in me took over. The part of my brain that processed emotional trauma shut down, and the part that analyzed risk engaged fully. I opened the notes app on my laptop. In the timeline the woman asked. "Tight," Ethan replied. "But we can sell it. The baby has to have someone else's last name. Understand, we cannot have any link back to me until the funds clear." The air left the room. The baby. I stared at the timer on the phone screen. 1 minute and 32 seconds. I sat there in my ergonomic chair, surrounded by the hum of the server room down the hall and the distant traffic of downtown Denver, and I felt absolute zero. Tears did not come. Panic did not set in. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. I typed the words Harbor Line and clinic appointment into my digital note. I recorded the exact time of the call. I transcribed their sentences verbatim, treating them like incriminating lines in a fraudulent ledger. They thought I was the variable they could control. They thought I was the passive wife who would apologize for breathing too loud. Ethan believed he had hung up the phone, closing the door on his double life. He was wrong. He had just handed me the opening balance of an investigation that would cost him everything. If this was a trap they had set for me, I decided right then that I would not struggle against the snare. I would simply document the mechanism of the trap until I knew exactly how to dismantle it and snap it back on their own fingers. The wedding was supposed to be the social event of the season. My younger sister, Kayla Harper, was marrying Miles Sterling at an exclusive desert resort outside Santa Fe, a place where the sunset looked like it had been filtered through a heavy layer of gold dust, but the celebration had started early. Just 2 days ago, Kayla had gathered the family to announce that she was pregnant. She was 8 weeks along. My mother, Diane, had clapped her hands together and cried tears of pure joy, calling it a miracle. My father, Frank, had toasted to the future heir. And everyone else had turned to look at me with that suffocating, heavy pity that I had grown accustomed to wearing like a second skin. They knew how hard Ethan and I had been trying. They knew about the negative tests and the quiet devastation. "Oh, Mara," my mother had said, squeezing my arm with a little too much force. "Your time will come. Try to be happy for your sister." I sat at my kitchen island, the laptop screen casting a cold blue light on my face, and replayed that memory. I replayed the sound of the woman on the phone laughing. The cadence was identical. The slight breathless hitch at the end of the giggle was a genetic marker as distinct as a fingerprint. It was Kayla. I did not vomit. I did not throw the laptop against the wall. Instead, I logged into our iCloud family sharing calendar. I was an auditor, and I needed to verify the data. I cross-referenced the dates. Kayla had been very vocal about her wellness appointments and dress fittings over the last 2 months. She loved the attention. I toggled the view to show Ethan's schedule. On every single date, Kayla had been unavailable. Ethan had blocked out time for client strategy sessions or off-site inspections. The blocks of time matched perfectly, down to the travel buffers. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Next, I opened our joint bank account. Ethan had always insisted on handling our finances. "You are too emotional with money." "Mara," he would say, shaking his head with a patronizing smile whenever I asked about the savings. "You let the numbers stress you out. Let me handle the burden." I had let him, because it was easier than fighting, and because part of me had believed him. Now, I saw the truth in the transaction history. Amidst the grocery bills and gas station charges, there were recurring transfers. They were small enough to avoid immediate detection, but frequent enough to matter. $150, $300, $200, all sent to an entity labeled Harborline Consulting. Harborline, the name he had mentioned on the call. I opened a new tab and searched for the company. It was a generic shell, registered to a post office box in a strip mall. I needed more. I needed a link that tied the money to the biology. I navigated to the email account we shared for household bills. The inbox was clean, manicured to perfection. Ethan was careful, but arrogance often mimics carelessness. He assumed I never looked. He assumed I was too checked out, too broken by my infertility to pay attention to administrative details. I clicked on the trash folder. There it was. A deleted confirmation email from 4 days ago. It was a receipt for a copay from Cedarline Women's Pavilion. I pulled up the address. It was a private clinic located in a county 90 minutes away from Denver. It was far enough to avoid running into neighbors, but close enough for a day trip. I opened the attachment. The patient name was redacted on the receipt, but the credit card used was a secondary card linked to our joint account, the one Ethan kept in his glove compartment for emergencies. The date aligned with his last late meeting. "God," I whispered, the sound escaping my lips before I could stop it. The betrayal was a physical weight in my chest, expanding and pressing against my ribs until it was hard to draw breath. My husband and my sister, they were not just sleeping together. They were building a financial exit strategy on the back of a baby that they were going to pass off as Miles's child to secure a trust fund payout or a settlement. I took a screenshot of the calendar comparison. I downloaded the bank statements highlighting the Harborline transfers. I saved the Cedarline invoice. I moved everything into a hidden encrypted folder on my hard drive that I had named recipes to avoid suspicion. Then, I did the hardest thing I had ever done. I marked the email as unread and moved it back to the trash folder. I closed the tabs. I cleared the browser history. I had to leave everything exactly as I had found it. If they sensed I knew, they would change their plans. They would cover their tracks. Ethan was already talking about signing papers and transferring funds. They were waiting for me to explode, to act like the jealous, barren sister and the shrill, nagging wife. They expected an emotional reaction. I would give them a forensic accounting instead. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the sun dip below the Rockies. I would go to Santa Fe. I would smile at the wedding. I would not say a word until I had enough evidence to bury them both. The isolation began at 30,000 feet. When we boarded the flight to Santa Fe, Ethan stopped at the entrance to the first-class cabin and held up his boarding pass with a look of mock confusion that fooled everyone but me. "Babe, this is a nightmare," he said, shaking his head. "The airline system separated us. They bumped you to economy plus because of an overbooking error. I tried to fix it at the gate, but the agent said the flight is fully capped." I looked at him. His eyes were flat, devoid of any real apology. "They told me exactly where I stood. I was luggage. It is fine," I said, my voice steady. "I will see you when we land." I walked past him to row 28, wedged between a crying toddler and a man who smelled like stale coffee. For 3 hours, I stared at the back of the seat in front of me, imagining Ethan and Kayla in the front rows, sipping champagne and touching hands under the complimentary blanket. When we arrived at the resort, the desert heat was dry and suffocating. My mother, Diane, greeted us in the lobby. She bypassed me completely to embrace Ethan, then looped her arm through mine, her grip tight and warning. "Now." "Mara," she whispered, leaning close so my father, Frank, who was busy tipping the bellman, would not hear. "Kayla is hormonal and sensitive. Do not bring your mood into her weekend. We all know how hard this is for you, but do not make her joy about your lack. I am just here to help." "Mom," I replied. "Good," she said, smoothing my collar with a sharp tug. "Just try to smile. You look severe." The welcome dinner was held on a terrace overlooking the red rocks. The table settings were exquisite, linen napkins folded into swans and crystal glasses sparkling in the twilight. There was a long head table for the wedding party and immediate family. I moved to take the seat next to my father, but Ethan placed a hand on the back of the chair. "Actually, honey," Ethan said, his voice loud enough for the table to hear, "I had them set you up at the smaller table near the patio doors. You know how these large groups trigger your migraines. The noise from the kitchen is better than the chatter of 20 people. Right. He was isolating me in plain sight. He was framing my exclusion as his benevolence. Miles, the groom, looked up from his menu. He was a good man, with a kind, open face that made my chest ache. He had no idea he was walking into a slaughter. "Are you sure?" Mara Miles asked, frowning. "We want you here with us. You are the maid of honor's sister. She is fine." "Miles," Ethan interjected smoothly. "Mara prefers the quiet. She gets overwhelmed easily lately. We are just looking out for her health." I met Miles's eyes and gave him a tight, thin smile. Ethan is right. I will be more comfortable over there. I sat alone at a table for 4, listening to the waiters argue in Spanish behind the swinging kitchen doors. I was invisible. I was the pathetic, barren sister who could not handle a party. It was the perfect cover. Halfway through the salad course, I stood up to use the restroom. The hallway leading to the facilities was dimly lit and lined with heavy tapestries. As I turned the corner, I heard hushed voices coming from the alcove near the emergency exit. "The dates don't match." "Ethan," Kayla's voice hissed. She sounded frantic. "The doctor said 8 weeks. Miles thinks we only started trying 6 weeks ago. If he does the math." He won't do the math. Ethan snapped. I have handled the narrative. I told them Mara is unstable, that she is projecting her own issues onto you. If she says anything, they will just think she is crazy. But the trust fund, Kayla whimpered. If the disbursement isn't signed before the birth. It will be, Ethan assured her, his tone dropping to a soothing, predatory purr. Once we get the initial signature for the baby's trust set up tomorrow, the money moves. We just need to keep things clean until the ink is dry. I pressed my back against the cool plaster of the wall. It was not just infidelity. It was grand larceny. Miles came from money, old money, and they were using the pregnancy to unlock a trust fund distribution that required a verified heir. I waited for them to leave before I returned to the terrace. I did not confront them. I did not throw my wine in their faces. Instead, I walked over to Kayla, who was feigning nausea at the head table. "Can I get you some ginger ale?" I asked, my voice sickeningly sweet. "Or maybe I can run to your room and steam your dress for tomorrow. I want everything to be perfect for you." Ethan looked at me with a smirk of triumph. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was submitting to the hierarchy he had created. "That would be great, Mara," Kayla said, looking at me with triumph in her eyes. "You are finally being useful. Anything for family," I said. I would steam the dress. I would fetch the drinks. I would be the perfect, invisible servant. I would let them build their tower of lies as high as they wanted, because the higher they climbed, the more fatal the fall would be when I finally kicked the foundation out from under them. I did not want to just ruin a wedding reception. I wanted to destroy their entire future, and I would wait until the very second they thought they had won to do it. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the room illuminated only by the glow of my laptop screen. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing at the speed of a high-frequency trading algorithm. I needed to know where the line was drawn between investigation and invasion of privacy. I opened a secure messaging app and typed a message to Tessa Rourke, my college roommate and a paralegal who terrified most attorneys she worked with. "I need to know how to build a folder that holds up in court," I typed. "Hypothetically, if I have access to joint assets, can I trace the other half?" Tessa replied almost instantly, 3 bubbles appearing and disappearing before the text landed. "Mara, do not hack anything," she wrote. "If you guess a password or access a device that is not yours, we lose the high ground. Stick to what your name is on. Create a timeline. Map the assets. Avoid the trap of getting emotional and losing control. If it is joint, it is fair game." "Understood," I whispered to the empty room. I went back to the bank statements. I started building a spreadsheet, cross-referencing the dates of the Harborline consulting transfers with our family calendar. It was almost insulting how lazy they had been. On October 4th, Ethan had been on a regional sales trip to Phoenix. On October 4th, Kayla had checked into a wellness retreat in Scottsdale. The transaction log showed a charge of $400 for a dinner at a steakhouse in Scottsdale on the joint card, followed immediately by a transfer to Harborline. They were funding their affair with our marital assets, and then laundering the money back out to look like business expenses. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. I decided to run a full credit report on myself, something I had not done in a year because Ethan always claimed he monitored our credit health. The report generated a PDF, and right at the top of the open accounts list was a platinum visa ending in 4492. It had been opened 5 months ago. The billing address was a post office box in a town 20 miles away. "I never applied for this," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I clicked on the transaction history for the card. It was maxed out. $18,000 in debt, all in my name. There were charges for the Ritz-Carlton. There was a charge for a diamond tennis bracelet that I had seen Kayla wearing at rehearsal dinner. And there, buried in the fees, was a recurring payment of $200 for Harborline document services. Ethan had stolen my identity. He was not just cheating, he was destroying my financial future to build a safety net for himself and Kayla. He was using my credit score to pay for the legal framework that would steal the trust fund money for their baby. I did not throw the computer. I did not march down the hall to their room and kick the door in. I calmly logged into the credit bureau's portal and initiated a total credit freeze. I set up two-factor authentication on every single account I owned, routing the codes to a burner phone app so Ethan would not see the notifications on my main device. I created a digital vault, uploading every PDF, every screenshot, every lie. I became a ghost in my own marriage. I posted nothing on social media. I did not text my mother. I let the silence expand, knowing that silence makes guilty people paranoid. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Miles. Mara, the text read, "Can I ask you something? Is it normal?" For a pregnant woman to be terrified of her husband touching her stomach, she pulls away every time I try to feel the baby. Like I am going to hurt it. I stared at the screen. Miles was a good man, and his instincts were finally waking up. He was sensing the repulsion Kayla felt, not because she was scared, but because the baby wasn't his. I typed my reply slowly, choosing each word with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. I did not accuse. I did not rant. I just planted the seed that would tear the whole garden down. Miles. I wrote, "Trust what you see, not what you are told." I turned off the phone and lay back on the pillows. They were asleep, thinking they had won. They had no idea that I had just locked the exits. The reception was held in a glass-walled pavilion that magnified the desert sunset, turning the room into a cage of gold light. I sat at my exile table near the kitchen, watching Ethan charm the room. He stood up, tapping a knife against his champagne flute, the sound cutting through the chatter. He looked handsome, the perfect brother-in-law, the devoted husband. He was holding the microphone with the casual confidence of a man who believes he owns the narrative. "We are all so incredibly happy for Kayla and Miles," Ethan said, his voice warm and rich like melted butter. He gestured toward the head table where Kayla sat, pale and trembling in her lace gown. "And for the little miracle on the way, it is a blessing, especially for us." He paused, turning his gaze toward me. It was a look of mock sympathy designed to paint me as fragile. "We all know how hard Mara has struggled," he continued, his tone dropping to a theatrically hushed volume. "We know how much she wanted this for herself. Sometimes, grief makes us see things that are not there. It makes us imagine problems just to cope with the emptiness. But tonight, we put Mara's active imagination aside to celebrate reality." A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the guests. He had done it. He had planted the seed that I was unstable, that any accusation I made later would be dismissed as the hallucinations of a jealous, barren woman. I did not look down. I did not cry. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress and walked steadily toward the head table. The room went quiet, expecting a toast or a tearful breakdown. Ethan's smile faltered just a fraction as I approached, but he held his ground. I walked past him, ignoring his outstretched hand, and stopped directly behind Kayla. I leaned down, placing my hands on her shoulders. I felt her flinch under my palms. To the crowd, it looked like a sisterly embrace. "You look beautiful." "Kayla," I said, my voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Then I lowered my mouth to her ear, my voice dropping to a whisper that was sharp as a scalpel. "But you forgot one thing, the call last night. It never actually ended." Kayla froze. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of her. Her eyes darted instantly, instinctively, past her groom and straight to Ethan. It was the look of a conspirator seeking orders, not a sister seeking comfort. Her hand shook violently, and her phone, which she had been clutching like a lifeline, slipped from her fingers. It clattered onto the china plate in front of her, landing face up. The screen lit up. A single notification appeared. The sender was listed only as E. I looked down. The message was short. Don't freeze. Smile. I did not hesitate. I pulled my own phone from my clutch. In one fluid motion, I snapped a photo of her screen, capturing the message, the sender's initial, and the timestamp. It took less than 2 seconds. I had the smoking gun. Ethan saw the flash. He crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides, abandoning his microphone. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my bicep with bruising force. His face was arranged in a mask of concern, but his eyes were pure rage. "Mara, honey," he said through gritted teeth, "you are making a scene. Come get some water." He tried to pull me away, his grip tightening painfully. I did not whisper this time. I looked him dead in the eye and spoke clearly into the sudden silence of the room. "Ethan, why are you squeezing my arm so hard?" I asked. "You are hurting me." The guests at the nearest table gasped. A woman lowered her fork. Ethan snatched his hand back as if he had been burned, realizing he had just broken character in front of an audience. Kayla stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. She looked at Miles, then at Ethan, and then she turned and ran. She did not walk. She sprinted out of the pavilion doors into the dark, desert night. Miles stood up slowly. He looked at the empty doorway, then at Ethan, and finally at me. He looked like a man waking up from a long, deep sleep into a nightmare. He had seen the fear on his new wife's face, and he knew, deep down, that it was not the fear of a bride. It was the fear of a criminal who had just been identified. I slipped my phone back into my bag. The murmurs began to rise around us, a crescendo of confusion and gossip. The perfect picture had cracked. "I think I will go lie down now," I said calmly to Ethan, whose jaw was clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. My imagination is exhausting me. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own making. I did not need to scream. I just had to light the fuse and walk out before the explosion. The door to our hotel room slammed shut with enough force to rattle the frame. Ethan turned the lock and spun around, the mask of the doting husband vanishing completely. His face was twisted into a sneer I had never seen before, ugly and raw. "Give me the phone. Mara!" he demanded, stepping into my personal space. "You are sick. You are having one of your episodes again. I am not going to let you destroy Kayla's life just because your own womb is empty." I stood by the dresser, clutching my purse. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained impassive. I was in the middle of an audit, and he was the hostile auditee. "I am not giving you anything," I said, my voice flat. "You took a picture of nothing," he shouted, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "It was a joke, a misunderstanding. But you twist everything. Give it to me before I call the paramedics and have you committed for a 72-hour hold." I looked him in the eye. "If you did nothing wrong." "Ethan, why are you so terrified of a single photograph?" He lunged for the bag, but my phone rang. It was my mother. He stopped, a cruel smile spreading across his lips. "Answer it," he hissed. "See whose side they are on." I put the phone on speaker. "Mara Ellison." Diane's voice shrieked through the tiny speakers, shrill and hysterical. "What is wrong with you? Kayla is in her room, hyperventilating. You are stressing the baby. You are going to kill this blessing with your jealousy, Mom." "Ethan is, I do not want to hear your lies," she cut me off. "You will go to her room right now. You will get on your knees, and you will beg for her forgiveness. You will fix this family, or so help me God, you will not have a family left to come home to." Ethan laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He leaned in close as the line went dead. "You see, you are the villain here. Mara, everyone knows you are the unstable one. By tomorrow morning, I will have every person in this resort convinced you are having a psychotic break. No one will believe a word about affairs or money. They will just see a sad, barren woman lashing out. He turned to storm out of the room, throwing the door open. I am going to check on Kayla. Stay here and rot. He stepped into the hallway and shouted back at me, losing control of his volume. And do not think for a second you are touching a dime of my money when I divorce you for insanity. He slammed the door, but not before I saw a figure standing in the corridor. Miles. Miles was standing 3 doors down, holding an ice bucket. He looked pale. He had heard the tone. He had heard the threat. For the first time, he had seen the monster beneath Ethan's polished suit. I waited 2 minutes, then grabbed my coat and took the service elevator down to the lobby. I found a quiet corner behind a potted palm and dialed Tessa. I need a lawyer, I said, not a mediator. I need a shark. Rowan Vale, Tessa said immediately. He eats fraudsters for breakfast. I already briefed him. He is expecting your call. I dialed the number she texted me. Rowan Vale answered on the first ring, his voice gravelly and precise. Mrs. Ellison, he said. Tessa sent me the file. Listen to me carefully. Do not leave the marital home. Do not empty the accounts. Transfer exactly 50% of the liquid assets into a separate escrow account tomorrow. If you take 1 penny more, it looks like theft. If you take half, it is asset preservation. We need to look like the reasonable party. Understood, I said, and Mara Rowan added, do not confront them again until you have a confession on record. Let them think they are winning. I have a plan for that, I replied. I hung up and stared out at the dark desert. I sent a text to Kayla. Meet me for coffee at 7 tomorrow. Just us. I want to apologize. I want to fix this. It was the bait. I went back to the room and lay in the bed next to the empty space where my husband should have been. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan cutting through the stagnant air, rehearsing my lines. They wanted me to be the broken, submissive sister. Tomorrow, I would play that role so perfectly that they would hand me the knife to cut their throats. I arrived at the resort cafe at 6:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before our agreed time. The air smelled of roasted beans and stale sanitizer. I chose a booth in the back corner with high, velvet-upholstered partitions that created a private acoustic bubble. As I slid into the seat, I froze. Miles was sitting in the booth directly behind me, facing away. He was slumped over a black coffee, staring at the wall, the dark circles under his eyes visible even in profile. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. I did not call out to him. I did not wave. I simply sat down quietly, knowing that the high back of the seat concealed me from his view, but the thin barrier would not block sound. Kayla arrived 20 minutes late. It was a power move, designed to make me wait, to remind me that my time was less valuable than hers. She wore oversized sunglasses and a silk robe that she had not bothered to change out of. She slid into the seat across from me, looking bored and irritated. Make this quick, Mara, she said, signaling a waiter for a latte without looking at him. Ethan told me you wanted to apologize. So, go ahead. Admit you are jealous of my pregnancy, and let's move on. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller. I kept my hands on the table, palms up in a gesture of surrender. You are right, I said softly. I have been difficult. I think the grief just got to me. I am going to pack my bags and leave Santa Fe this afternoon. I will stay out of your lives. Kayla smirked, the tension leaving her shoulders. She had won. Finally. That is the most sensible thing you have said all week. I just need one thing. Kayla, I said, looking down at my hands. Just for my own peace of mind, so I can stop obsessing. Please, just tell me the truth so I can let it go. What she snapped. The baby? I asked, my voice trembling perfectly. It is Miles's. Right. Of course it is, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. You are sick, Mara. Then why? I paused, letting the silence hang for a second before dropping the hammer. Why did I find invoices from Cedarline Women's Pavilion? And why is Ethan transferring money to Harborline Consulting on the same days you have appointments? Kayla's face hardened. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss, abandoning the lie because she thought she was kicking a beaten dog. Stop digging, Mara. You do not understand how this works. We need the trust fund disbursement to cover the debts. Miles is just the signature on the paper. Ethan is the only one who knows how to actually secure the money we need to survive. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, there was a scraping sound from the booth behind us. Miles stood up. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Kayla. His face was gray, drained of all blood, looking like he had been struck by a physical blow. A signature, Miles asked, his voice cracking. You just called me a signature. Kayla jumped in her seat, spinning around. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose, revealing eyes wide with sheer terror. Miles! She shrieked, scrambling to stand up. No, baby, no. You were not supposed to hear that. She tricked me. Mara is doing this. She is twisting my words. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She is jealous. She is infertile, and she wants to steal you. She is making this up. I did not say a word. I did not defend myself. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and opened the photo I had taken at the wedding, the text message from E telling her not to freeze. I slid the phone across the polished table toward Miles. He looked down. He saw the timestamp. He saw the sender. He saw the command. He stared at the screen for a long time, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Then, his hand shook as he placed the phone back down, as if it were contaminated. Miles, please, Kayla begged, grabbing his arm. It is not what it looks like. Ethan and I are just... We are just close friends. He is helping us. Miles pulled his arm away from her grip with a violent jerk. We are going to the clinic in town, Miles said. His voice was unrecognizable cold, dead, and final. We are doing a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. Right now, today. Kayla recoiled as if he had slapped her. No, you cannot. It is dangerous for the baby. You are letting her poison you against your own child. If it is my child, you have nothing to fear, Miles said, stepping back from her. If you refuse the test, Kayla, I am annulling this marriage before noon. Kayla stood there, mouth open, tears streaming down her face that did not move him an inch. By refusing, she had just signed her confession. I picked up my phone, put it back in my bag, and took a sip of my water. My hand did not shake at all. The silence in our Denver house was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I had returned from Santa Fe early, leaving Ethan behind to scramble for damage control with the family. I did not waste time unpacking. I sat at my desk with 3 monitors glowing, executing a financial separation with the precision of a surgeon. I opened a new checking account at a bank Ethan had never used. I calculated the total balance of our joint savings and investment accounts down to the cent. Then, I initiated a wire transfer for exactly 50% of the total, not a penny more. If I took 51%, his lawyers could paint me as vindictive or greedy. By taking exactly half, I was simply preserving my marital share. Next came the credit freeze. I logged into the fraud reporting portal for the credit card Ethan had opened in my name. I marked every transaction as unauthorized, uploaded the affidavit of identity theft, and saved the submission confirmation as a PDF. I built a digital fortress around my identity in less than 2 hours. My phone buzzed with a notification from Facebook. It was a tag from Ethan. I hesitated, then clicked it. He had posted a photo of us from 2 years ago, looking happy. The caption read, "Please keep my beautiful wife Mara in your prayers. She is going through a severe mental health crisis and is struggling to distinguish reality from her fears right now. We are asking for privacy as we help her heal." He was trying to get ahead of the story. He wanted our community to dismiss anything I said as the ravings of a broken woman. I did not comment. I did not react. Instead, I forwarded the screenshot to Rowan Vale. 30 minutes later, Rowan sent a formal letter to Ethan's work email and personal email, notifying him of the asset freeze and the impending forensic accounting audit. We did not fight on Facebook. We fought in the ledger. My phone rang again. It was Miles. "Mara," he said, his voice sounding hollow, stripped of its usual warmth. "I looked into the trust fund details like you said. And I asked. The disbursement schedule was accelerated," he said. "Kayla petitioned the trustees 2 weeks ago for an early release of $200,000 for medical urgency related to the pregnancy. Ethan co-signed as the financial advisor witnessing the request. I found out why they need it." "Miles," I replied, looking at the spreadsheet on my screen. I had finally cracked the shell of Harborline Consulting. It was not a business. It was a funnel for an offshore betting platform. Ethan isn't investing. He is covering massive losses. He is in debt. Miles, deep debt. "They needed your baby to bail him out." "I am going to kill him," Miles whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You are going to let the law bury him." I heard the garage door open. Ethan was home. He walked into the kitchen carrying a pizza box and a thick manila envelope. He looked exhausted. His tie loosened, his eyes scanning the room to gauge my mood. "Mara," he said, putting the pizza on the counter. "I brought your favorite, pepperoni and hot honey. Look, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand." He slid the envelope across the granite island toward me. "I had my lawyer draw this up," he said, his voice dropping to that reasonable, manipulative tone he used so well. "It is a post-nuptial agreement. It guarantees you the house and a generous alimony if we ever split. I just want you to feel secure." I opened the envelope. I skipped the financial numbers and went straight to the clauses on page 4. There it was, buried in legal jargon. Clause 14B. The undersigned agrees to waive any rights to forensic examination of historical assets and acknowledges a history of emotional instability that may affect perception of financial events. He was trying to buy my silence and my sanity in one signature. I looked up at him. He was watching me intently, sweat beading on his upper lip. "You think I am stupid," I said. "I think you are stressed," he countered, stepping closer. "Just sign it, Mara. We can put the affair nonsense behind us. We can start fresh. I will forgive you for the scene at the wedding." I picked up the document. I walked over to the trash can, depressed the pedal with my foot, and dropped the papers onto the coffee grounds and eggshells. "You do not want to fix the marriage." "Ethan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mara, be reasonable. You do not need me to sign." I interrupted him, staring dead into his eyes. "You need me to shut up." For the first time in 10 years, I saw genuine fear flicker behind his eyes. He realized then that the money was gone. The plan was dead, and the wife he thought he could control had just become the witness who would destroy him. The invitation from my mother, Diane, was phrased as a reconciliation dinner, but as soon as I pulled into the driveway, I knew it was an ambush. The curtains were drawn tight, and Ethan's car was already parked next to my father's, blocking the exit path. I did not come alone. I brought Tessa, my paralegal friend, who walked beside me with a notepad and the stony expression of a grim reaper. I also carried a sealed bottle of water in my purse. I was done consuming anything in that house that I did not open myself. We walked into the dining room, and the tableau was staged for a confession. My parents sat at the head and foot of the table, with Kayla weeping softly into a handkerchief on the side. Ethan stood up as I entered, his face arranging itself into a mask of weary concern. "Mara, honey," he said, walking over to embrace me. "I am so glad you came. We just want to heal." He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his side. To Tessa and my parents, It looked like a hug, but his fingers dug into the soft flesh of my upper arm, pinching hard enough to bruise. It was a physical warning. "Sit down." "Mara," Diane said, her voice sharp. She glared at Tessa. "This is a private family matter. She should wait in the car." "Tessa stays," I said, pulling away from Ethan's painful grip and taking a seat. "She is my witness. Anything you say to me—" "You say to her," Kayla let out a choked sob. "See, she brings strangers here to humiliate me. She is threatening my baby. She is stressing me out on purpose, so I miscarry. I never mentioned the baby." "Kayla," I said, my voice steady. "I am talking about adults, bank transfers, and forged signatures. I am talking about evidence." "Enough," Diane slammed her hand on the table. She slid a single sheet of paper toward me. "We are done with these delusions. You are going to sign this. Mara. It is a statement retracting your lies. It says you fabricated the accusations out of jealousy and a mental breakdown. Sign it. Apologize to your sister, and we can maybe keep Ethan from divorcing you." I looked at the paper. It was an admission of guilt that would destroy my credibility forever. Ethan leaned down, his breath hot against my ear, his voice a whisper that only I could hear. "If you do not sign that paper right now," he hissed, "I will have the involuntary commitment order signed by morning. You will wake up in a facility. Mara. And no one will listen to a crazy woman." I picked up the pen. Ethan smirked, thinking his threat had landed. Then the front door opened. It was not locked. I had made sure Tessa left it unlatched when we entered. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by the sharp click of dress shoes. Miles walked into the dining room. He was not alone. Behind him stood a man in a charcoal suit carrying a leather briefcase, the Sterling family attorney. The room was deathly silent. Kayla stopped crying instantly. Ethan straightened up, his hand falling from my shoulder. "Miles," Diane asked, her voice trembling. We were just working things out." Miles did not look at her. He walked to the table and threw a manila envelope onto the center of the lace tablecloth. It landed with a heavy thud. "Working things out?" Miles asked, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Is that what you call it?" I found the emails. "Diane, you sent Kayla a reminder to get the trust fund disbursement signed before he asks questions. You were in on it. You knew they were using my child as a cash grab." Diane went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "That is a misunderstanding." Ethan stammered, stepping forward, his charm failing him. "Miles, listen. We were just trying to secure the baby's future." "Shut up," Miles snapped. He reached into the folder and pulled out a spreadsheet. My lawyer pulled the logs. "Harborline Consulting. It is a shell for a sports betting debt, isn't it? Ethan, you owe nearly $300,000 to loan sharks. That is where the money was going." He tossed another paper on the table. "And the clinic invoice. You drove Kayla to her appointments. You paid for them. You are the father. The room was spinning for them, but for me, everything was finally in focus." I pulled my phone out and placed it on the table, activating the speaker. "Rowan," I said. "I am here." Rowan Vale's voice boomed through the room, clear and terrifying. "Mrs. Ellison, I have just filed an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets. We have also submitted a formal complaint regarding identity theft and credit fraud against Mr. Ellison. The forensic accounting team starts tomorrow." Ethan looked at me. The threat of the psych ward was gone, replaced by the terrifying reality of a prison cell. Kayla looked at Diane, who was staring at the table in shame. The trap they had built for me had just snapped shut on their own necks. "I am not signing anything," I said, standing up and capping my water bottle. "But you all might want to start looking for defense attorneys." The conference room at Sterling Mesa Legal was cold enough to preserve meat. We sat on opposite sides of a mahogany table that felt miles wide. On one side, my mother, Kayla, and Ethan sat huddled together like survivors on a life raft, looking pale and defensive. On my side, it was just me, Rowan Vale, and Miles. Miles looked older than he had 24 hours ago. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by the hardened look of a man who had seen too much. Ethan spoke first, his voice tight and aggressive. "This is all inadmissible," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She recorded a private conversation without consent. In this state, that is illegal wiretapping. Anything she claims she heard is fruit of the poisonous tree. You cannot use it in court, and you cannot use it to threaten us." Rowan didn't even look up from his file. He flipped a page with a dry snap. "Mr. Ellison, you called her," Rowan said, his voice bored. "You failed to terminate the connection. There is no expectation of privacy when you leave a line open to a third party. Furthermore, she did not record audio. She documented a timeline based on a live event. We have the carrier logs showing the call duration was 42 minutes, not the 2 minutes you claimed." "It does not matter anyway," Miles said, his voice flat. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a medical report with the logo of a specialist clinic. You guys kept trying to shift the dates. You said I just miscalculated conception. You gaslit me into thinking I was crazy." Miles took a breath, his eyes fixed on Kayla. "But I was diagnosed with congenital absence of the vas deferens when I was 20. Miles revealed, I am sterile. I cannot have children naturally. I never told Kayla because, well, I thought we had time to discuss IVF or adoption later. But there is 0% chance that baby is mine." The silence that followed was heavy, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Kayla looked at the paper, then at Miles, and then she screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound of a cornered animal. "He told me it would work," she shrieked, scrambling away from the table and pointing a trembling finger at Ethan. "He promised me, he said once we got the trust money, he would leave Mara and we could start over. He said nobody would ever check the DNA until it was too late." "Shut up," Kayla Ethan roared, his face turning a violent shade of red. He recoiled from her as if she were contagious. "She is lying. She is hysterical. She seduced me. I was trying to help the family, and she trapped me." My mother, Diane, sat back in her chair. She looked from her sobbing daughter to the son-in-law she had idolized for years, finally seeing him for the parasite he was. She realized then that the golden boy she had defended had only ever seen them as a paycheck. Rowan raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "We are moving past the affair," he said calmly. "We are looking at grand larceny and identity theft. My forensic team found the credit card application. It was opened from an IP address registered to Ethan's work laptop. The funds were funneled to Harborline Consulting, which we have identified as a shell entity for an illegal gambling debt collection agency. You stole your wife's identity to pay off your bookie." Ethan sank into his chair. He looked small. He opened his mouth to argue, but Miles pulled out his phone. "I took this from Kayla's phone while she was sleeping last night," Miles said. "She likes to keep voice memos." He pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable, recorded from a few nights ago. "Don't worry, babe. Once the 200,000 hits from the trust, I pay off the Vegas guys, and we disappear. Miles is so stupid. He thinks he is going to be a dad." Kayla collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. Ethan went completely silent, his eyes staring at the table. Realizing there was no lie left to tell, Rowan closed the file. "We are forwarding the identity theft and fraud files to the district attorney unless full restitution is made immediately. And Mrs. Ellison," he looked at me, "we will take the house, the savings, and the retirement accounts. He leaves with nothing but his debt." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, the only sound in the dead room. I looked at the wreckage of my family. My mother could not meet my eyes. Kayla was broken. Ethan was finished. You all look at me like I am the villain, I said quietly, like I ruined your lives. But I did not break this family. I did not steal the money. I just turned up the volume because someone forgot to press end. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I did not look back at my mother calling my name. I did not look back at Ethan's pale face. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the building and stepped out into the bright, cold Denver afternoon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally tasted clean. It was over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from today, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.